Minicastle é um oferecimento dos nossos patrocinadores.
Hi guys, welcome to the undubbed version of the interview. Yes, we launched the dubbed version. It's on the little sphere, the little ball over here, the little eye over here anywhere on the screen. If you want to watch them in Portuguese. If you want to watch it, the original interview with the original voices and everything, just continue. It's just after this little thing I have to do. Since I don't know which version of the video Mr. Kalinske will eventually watch, so let me do this again. Mr. Kalinske, I am the guy who had the honor of dubbing you in the video. I've been helping, offering to be quite honestly, much less of a hand I really wish to, but trying to give a helping hand to Flávio on his papers, and well, it's an honor. It's a boundless honor to dub you, and it's a boundless honor to translate an interview made with you. During my MBA, I have done 2 papers on strategy, on marketing strategy, using your tactics and techniques used during Sega. Yes, I did an MBA on Brazilian video game market. And your actions trying to find a market for more adult, more edgy, more teen, trying to go looking for the older brother, as you so eloquently put, was what changed the market, was affected the marketing in Brazil and tech toy markets so greatly and made video game in Brazil so different than the rest of the world. Although I'm with a Sonic t-shirt, and I do love my Sonic and my Sonic Mania, I was always more of a Nintendo boy. Yeah. Although I did have the Mega Drive, I never had the Power Base, didn't have the Master System. I had a Mega Drive and the Sega CD. I didn't have the 32X. It didn't work. I didn't have the Saturn nor the Dreamcast. I was one of the guys who jumped on the Steve Racer $299 PlayStation and Nintendo 64. But, and I totally agree with you with the positions about the Saturn. I can't put enough how much of an honor was to do, how much of an honor it was to help Flávio with this paper. And I would love if in the future you could give us an interview straight for the channel, straight for YouTube. We would love to have you, love to accommodate any necessities you could have, and we would love to ask you like 20, 30 questions, some of them about your time on the toy business, because you were the mind behind the Masters of the Universe. I had like hundreds of Masters of the Universe action figures. You were the mind who made Barbie great again. So I would love to ask you a lot of things about the toy business. I would love to ask you like dozens of questions about your time at Sega. And I would like, as somebody who sees himself as someone trying to help with education of anybody I can, I would love to make you a dozen questions about your new projects and the new positions you got on board of directors of companies who are directly linked to education. Again, thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for having Flávio. And thank you so much for the honor again. You are great. You're an inspiration. Thank you. And now, let's go for the interview.
Sorry, I am a bit too excited here because, well, you are a legend, so I'm a bit nervous if my English isn't clear enough for you. I'm very sorry for that.
You sound good. Down in Brazil,
thank you. Yes, in Brazil. I have been a great fan of Sega since my childhood, so I decided to do my undergraduate thesis about Sega. And the difference is that Japan and the United States have, and how those differences impacted Sega's marketing during your time as CEO. Because you have mentioned in multiple interviews and books that many times the Japanese team kind of stabbed you on the back when you were trying to do certain more aggressive marketing actions like that. Genesis does what Nintendo don't think, and those sorts of more strong marketing that you get so famous for.
Well, you're right, and the crazy thing is, I had a great time at Sega, and I'm still very close to many of my former colleagues. I talk to Al Nielsen probably every week. I see Madeline Schroeder Canepa all the time. I see Shinobu Toyota all the time, and Paul Rio. So I'm still very close with many of my former Sega colleagues. But it wasn't, and I had a great time while I was there. And for a long while, Nakayama-san and the Japanese senior management in Japan, they did let me do what I wanted to do. But then all of a sudden it changed. And I couldn't figure it out. And I really didn't realize the reason until after I had left Sega. So anyway.
Yeah, but for starters, who is Tom Kalinske? Tell us about your history as a person and as a professional.
Okay. And I gather you've read Console Wars.
Yes, I have.
The film, the documentary, was supposed to be released at South by Southwest, but because of COVID-19, they canceled South by Southwest conference. So we don't know when it's going to be released now. We think if COVID-19 ends, it'll be released in a theater in either August or September, and then it would go on CBS television here. I don't know what they'll do down in Brazil. Anyway, so I was born in Iowa City, Iowa. My father was a professor. My mother was very artistic. I have 3 brothers and sisters. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. My dad was head of engineering for a company that designed water filtration equipment for cities or businesses or what have you. And I ended up going to the University of Wisconsin because my family was from Wisconsin. Both my mother and father were from Wisconsin, and I had lots of cousins back in Wisconsin. So I went back to Madison, Wisconsin, where it was freezing cold in the winter. I wasn't used to that. I graduated from there, went into the U.S. Army for a while during the Vietnam years because I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I joined an armor unit, tanks. So I became a tank commander. Then I went to the University of Arizona Graduate School. I actually started my master's degree at Wisconsin, but then because of the Vietnam War, I had to stop that and join the Army. Finished at University of Arizona, ended up getting a job in New York City at J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency. And I worked on new product development there. It was a very special group of people, something that advertising agencies don't do today. But we worked on many different things. We worked on chunking frozen egg rolls. I worked on, the most famous one I worked on was Flintstones vitamins for children. And it became the #1 selling vitamin in the United States. Then was hired from there by Mattel. I started as a product manager at Mattel. Started on preschool toys, the C&C, the Jack in the Box, wooden toys, and rose up the ranks to become a vice president there, and then was head of the Barbie division for quite a long time. Changed the Barbie business from a $42 million business to a $350 million business, and developed Masters of the Universe with a team, and introduced it and its television show, and it became a big, big hit.
It was one of my favorite television shows when I was a kid. I grew up in the 90s, but it showed up on TV anyway, and I loved it when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was a great television show. It was a great product line. I ended up becoming president of Mattel Toys, and Mattel back in those days, in the 80s, early 80s, was a conglomerate. Owned Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, owned Western Publishing, a book publishing company, owned a tubular steel company, an audio tape manufacturing company, an electric organ manufacturing company, a pet supply company, and also in television, which I'm sure you're aware of. And,
Yes, I know very well what it is.
and of course, that year, and I think it was 1982, Atari almost went out of business. It declined dramatically. They had overshipped hardware and software.
They even shipped the ET tape to here. They were selling it here where the American people couldn't find the tapes and see that Atari was actually on bad shape.
Well, it caused Atari to go out of business, and it caused Mattel to lose $100 million. And our banks were very mad at us, and they wouldn't refinance us, and we needed working capital for our toy company. So we ended up having to sell everything. We sold Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. We sold Western Publishing. We closed down in television and sold it for practically nothing. And we had to get refinanced by Mike Milken, the so-called junk bond financing, and in order to survive. And during that time, I became president and CEO. And we ended up getting ourselves out of deep trouble. But I was kind of tired of the whole thing by then, and so a friend of mine and I bought Matchbox toys out of receivership in the UK, and we turned Matchbox toys around and made it profitable again, and took it public on the New York Stock Exchange, and then we sold it to Tyco. And interestingly enough, later Mattel bought Tyco, and it became a Mattel brand, which it is today. Long after I'd gone, though. And so that's when I was hired by. I knew Nakayama-san. I knew Sega. I had met with them several times because they had some arcade licenses that we were interested in the toy division, and they were interested in things like our Masters of the Universe license. And they were interested in Hot Wheels, and so we had conversations, and he tracked me down on vacation in Hawaii and convinced me to go to Japan with him to look at 16-bit technology. Because remember, I was only familiar with television. I wasn't familiar with new kinds of technologies. I fell in love with 16-bit technology, and I fell in love with the idea of a handheld device that had a color LCD screen. And so I agreed to join the company on the condition that he would let me make the decisions for the United States market. And he said yes, and that was the start of it. That's how I got to Sega.
All right, and you always were into that educational thing, right? Because after you left Sega, I have read that you went into many educational companies, so you still believe on the value of education as an entertainment as well, as an entertainment as a tool for education. That's a part of our philosophy, so to speak.
It is very much part of what I'm still doing that, by the way. I'm still serving on some boards of directors of education technology companies. When I left Sega, I was really impressed by the power of video games. And I thought, why can't we use the video game paradigm, video game technology, to make curriculum as fun and interesting and involving as a video game is? And so I started doing that, and I did it again. I was financed by Mike Milken, who I mentioned earlier, and Larry Ellison. They each invested $250 million, and we formed a company called Knowledge Universe. Our philosophy was to use technology to improve education, cradle to grave. We did preschool companies, we did school systems, we did charter schools, we did Leapfrog, where I went in as CEO. We did something called K-12, which was the best curriculum that we could put together and develop for homeschoolers and for kids who had issues like ADD and ADHD. And anyway, so I believe very much in that. And I did that for 9 years, and it became very successful. We ended up returning on Milken and Ellison's $500 million investment. We returned $3.5 billion back to them. So it was a very successful effort, and it proved basically to the world that education companies could become profitable and could be investment. And so that started a trend that's going on today, where many people are starting education technology companies and getting involved in them. I went on the board of Blackboard, which is a large learning management system, school systems. I was on the board of Cambium Learning Group, which was another education company for many, many years. We ended up selling it recently to Veritas Education. So I've been involved in education technology. I still am today. I'm on the board of something called Storytime. I'm on the board of something called Adjunct Professor Link. I'm on the board of something called Genius. And I'm also chairman of a 3D printing company, chairman of a company called Mixed Dimensions.
That's where I found your email.
We have technology where we can, in a video game, when you create a character, a warrior, or a spaceship, and that character you created, or that spaceship you created, become a big business. This is a couple $1 million business right now. But I'm enjoying doing it.
Oh, great. But history said about the redesign of Sonic the Hedgehog by Miss Schroeder and you, that you thought the original design for Sonic wouldn't work in the American market. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
You're asking about Sonic?
Yes, about the first design of Sonic, where he had a blonde girlfriend and a guitar.
Yeah. So when we first looked at what Japan had created, what a couple guys in Japan had created, Naka-san and Hoshino-san and a couple of others, he had big fangs, real sharp fangs sticking up like this. And he had very sharp spikes on his back, and he was kind of mean. And he had a girlfriend named Madonna. She had a rock band, and we knew that wasn't going to work. And so we redrew it, if you will, and we made him we got rid of his fangs. We made him a nicer character, if you will. We wanted his personality to still be a little bit cutting edge. We wanted his personality to be kind of like the smart-ass teenager that lives next door to you, gets in trouble every now and then, but ultimately always does the right thing. And of course, we wanted to emphasize his speed, his movement speed as much as we could. So those were the changes that we wanted made to Sonic the Hedgehog, and eventually Japan agreed and made those changes. And I think that's one of the reasons Sonic was so successful around the world.
Yes, because the book Console Wars even mentioned a history where you took your team to Toys R Us and showed them different toys, implying that you wanted Sonic to have an atmosphere, a kind of history behind the character to make it more involving to the kids. Do you still believe that's what made Sonic so successful, besides the games being good, of course?
That almost every really good video game has a good story behind it. And I liked it when we would write a Bible we wrote a Bible for Sonic the Hedgehog, about his life, his history, what things he would do, things he wouldn't do. And we wrote good stories about Sonic the Hedgehog. And I still believe in that. I believe that storytelling is very important. I think if you have a good story, there's a better chance you'll have a successful video game, or for that matter, a product, a toy product. So yeah, the stories were very important. And of course, later we did a license with the comic book companies, and they did their own stories, some of which were quite good. And then when we did the television series, we did 2 television series on Sonic the Hedgehog. And we would read every script, and a lot of scripts, by the way. It's like 65 episodes I had to read. And at the end, we always made sure there was a positive message emanated from that particular 30-minute episode. So, yes, I believe very much in storytelling.
But besides Sonic, what other products were reason for a clash between the American and the Japanese team at Sega? Do you still remember any other of them that were remarkable for you, or something?
Well, on products, not so much. I mean, there were products that Japan wanted us to do that we wouldn't do. For example, there was a product that they were in Japan that had Nazi symbols in it. German Nazi symbols in it. And of course, we wouldn't do that in the United States. And they didn't really understand. It's funny, they didn't really understand why that wouldn't be acceptable. I found it strange to have to explain that to the Japanese people. I don't remember specifically other things that they didn't want to, or they did want to do. they were initially very reluctant to let us do as many U.S.-based products as they did. You know, we did deals with Disney, of course, and deals with Universal Studios, and you know, the Jurassic Park license, and many Disney licenses, of course. Aladdin was a very good game. Mickey Mouse was a very Castle of Illusion was a very good game.
That's a classic. That's a true
it really
classic.
Is. We even did a game, a Fantasia game, which was really remarkable.
I never played that one. I never played that one.
It's an interesting story. I don't know if it's been told very often. So we did this beautiful Fantasia game. You know, Fantasia, the movie, was such a beautiful work of art.
It's an awesome film, indeed. It's an awesome film.
Yeah. We developed a great game, and we just started to ship it. And I got a call from the head of Disney Interactive, and he said, "Tom, you have to stop shipping the Fantasia game. I'm flying from Los Angeles to San Francisco in the morning. I'll meet you at the airport and explain why you have to stop this game." And so I thought, oh my God, what did my programmers do? Did they put a naked woman in there somewhere or something? What is going on? Anyway, so this guy comes up here, I think his name was Steve Burke, and he says, "Tom, we didn't realize that before Walt Disney died, he told everyone never to license the Fantasia movie products. It should remain as a work of art. It should not be released as a product." And so we'd only shipped, well, we shipped quite a few. I think we'd shipped like 50,000 of the game already. We had to have our people go to retail and get the product out of retail and bring it back. Had another 50,000 in a warehouse in California. We had to destroy them. And the Disney company, though, said, "We will make up lost profits to you because this is totally our fault. We didn't know that Walt Disney had made this commitment." And so the only reason it ever came up was Walt Disney's nephew, the only one left in the company who knew of this promise Walt Disney had made. So they did. They made up the lost sales and profit by giving us very favorable royalties or no royalty on other products like Aladdin and other products. So good to their word. They made us whole, if you will. But anyway, to get back to your question, I don't recall many differences where we fought over a particular product between Japan and the United States. I think 32X was one such a product. And of course, I didn't want to introduce Saturn when we did. I wanted to wait another year.
All Nielsen mentioned to you that the 32X wasn't going to work, right? And the book says as such. I don't know if it's true, but...
Say that again?
Yeah, I remember reading in the book that all Nielsen said to you that the 32X wasn't going to work in the United States. Do you actually believe that?
Yeah, I do remember. I do remember that. I must confess, I wasn't that against 32X because I hoped that it would help keep Genesis alive, and I thought maybe this would help us not have to introduce Saturn as early as we were forced to do, which of course didn't work. So I think the problem with 32X, one of the problems with 32X is we didn't have good enough software supporting it. Japan was supposed to have done 6 titles to support it, and we were supposed to have done 6 titles to support it in the United States, and some other third parties were supposed to do some other titles, and we didn't get it done. And that, of course, resulted in introducing a product without adequate or good enough software. That's a reason for failure. So that's really why I think 32X wasn't successful. We just didn't do a good enough job on getting the software out. And part of that was Japan's fault, part of it was our fault.
And why did you think and even say that even to this day that the Saturn wasn't a good product? What made you think that back then and now?
Well, first of all, I wanted Genesis. I thought Genesis had another year of life at least. And so I didn't want to rush a new platform out. We still were doing very well with Genesis. And I relied on my head of R&D very much, a guy named Joe Miller, brilliant guy. And Joe think that Saturn was a big enough step up from the Genesis. He thought the next platform should be even better than what Saturn was. And specifically, remember the timing of this, the internet was just getting started. getting started. Joe wanted next system have internet connectivity, and so he was very much ahead of his time, if you will. And I think the book talks about the possibility of doing a deal with Sony. Sony was just a software
it mentions
developer.
that very long.
Sony, and they were just doing software at the time, and largely were trained by Joe and his team on how to do good software. So, and you always lose money on hardware sales. You don't make money on hardware sales. So we were very close to the Sony people, very close to Olaf Olafsson, who was head of the interactive division. We were very close to Mickey Shuloff, the president of Sony US. And we went to Japan and met with Sony and said, hey, why don't we do the next hardware platform together? It'll be called the Sony Sega hardware or Sega Sony, whatever you want to call it. But we'll jointly develop it, and then we'll each develop software for it. And whoever software will share the loss on the hardware. Whoever does the better software and those sales and get that profit. Well, we were much better at software development in those days than Sony was, so I thought this is a great deal for Sega. Sony agreed to it, and we went to Sega, and Nakayama-san did not agree, and that's why that never occurred. I also I was quite close with the guy named Clark, who founded. He was head of Silicon Graphics at the time. He was chairman of Silicon Graphics, a very big specialized computer company that made wonderful computers for doing graphics for movies and television shows and what have you. And he had a chipset that I thought was better for a video game system than anything that existed. Joe and I went and looked at it. We liked it. We asked Japan to come over and look at it. So Sato-san came over with some other guys. They looked at it and said, no, it's too complicated a chipset. It's too big. Too much waste in manufacturing. So we can't do it. And they wanted to do Saturn the way it was. They weren't going to change their mind. And Jim ended up selling that chipset to Nintendo, and it became the Nintendo 64. So I tried many times to not have to introduce Saturn, but I was forced to introduce it early. I was forced to introduce it without proper software support, and I was forced to introduce it when we didn't even have enough hardware. Even supply the retailers with enough hardware. It was a mess. It was a real mess.
But since you don't remember any products, do you believe, because that's my main thesis, that the American team and the Japanese team had a different view, especially on marketing, and since that view was so different, the company just couldn't work out?
Let me tell you what I learned after I'd left the company. I wondered why all of a sudden, toward the end of my time at Sega, why didn't I have better cooperation with Japan middle management specifically? Because not everything went to Nakayama-san. I mean, there was lots of stuff that happened in my vice presidents and their vice presidents, or my directors or managers and their directors and managers. But all of a sudden, we stopped getting support, if you will. And what I learned after I left the company was that Nakayama-san would walk into a meeting room every Monday morning, and he would yell at his team and basically say to them, remember, we now had a 55% share of market in the United States. In Japan, I don't think their share of market ever got above 10 or 11 or 12%. Very small. Nakayama would walk into what was called the decision room, all of his directors and managers in there, and he'd yell at them, why aren't you as successful as Tom is in the United States? Why can't you do what he's doing? Why is it they're so successful and we're not here in Japan? You're embarrassing me. Well, you can imagine how these people felt week after week after week, being yelled at and him pounding on the table, and sometimes he even pounded on them. So they learned to hate the United States and to hate Tom. So it was a very strange situation where our success in the U.S. was one of the reasons why we failed to continue to have cooperation and team, and that of course caused lots of problems. So ultimately, I think that was why it became very, very difficult for me to stay in the company with that going on, and that was why I ultimately left the company.
How much of the success of the Genesis on the United States and the Mega Drive in Brazil, as I mentioned in the emails we trade, was due to your view on business and marketing? How much success the Genesis owned to Tom Kalinske?
Well, I think I inherited some of the successful strategies. I emphasized them a lot more than was being done. I really wanted to take on Nintendo directly. You mentioned the Sega does what Nintendo don't, but we also made fun of Nintendo in our advertising. Many of our commercials positioned Nintendo as a slow old machine and as fit for young little boys, but not good enough for teens and older men and college-age men. And we kept hammering on that point, which Sega Japan disagreed with completely. They did not like that I was taking on Nintendo, another Japanese company. They didn't feel it was appropriate. They didn't think it was the right thing to do. So that was a big area of conflict. But we did it here in the United States, and I know that they did it in England a lot too. Under Nick did it there in England. I'm not sure about how we did it in Brazil or not. I don't know if we were as aggressive in Brazil.
No, Nintendo didn't even have an official presence here. Brazil is literally the place where Sega was left alone on the video game marketing.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, lucky.
Yes, indeed. But I must say, the marketing here in Brazil was a genius thing. It worked so beautifully that many people, even my father, still remember the Mega Drive to this day. It remarked many people here in Brazil. So
Yeah.
I must congratulate you for that, because that was awesome.
We had a good team down in Brazil too. Oh gosh, what was his name that marketed it in Brazil? Very good guy. Oh, my mind is failing me today. But anyway, I've met him several times. I never went down to Brazil, but I've met him many times here in the United States when he visited here. And he was very, very good marketeer. So anyway, we made fun of Nintendo. We went after an older age market here in the United States. That was more my doing. Here in the U.S., we had a male game player on almost every college campus, and we sent him free hardware and free software, and all we asked him to do was get into a men's dormitory and play video games in the lounge for a while or in the fraternities, and just talk up Sega. So we did things that were not done by many. Well, Nintendo never would do something like that, I don't think. So we did comparisons in the malls. Al Nielsen actually had that idea. We compared.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Super
You did
NES to Genesis.
a mall tour, right? Around the US, like putting the Genesis and the Super Nintendo side by side and letting people decide which one was the best.
Right, and that worked really well. We won that comparison about 82% of the time. So that worked really well for us. We sponsored rock concerts. They didn't do that kind of thing in Japan. We were the first video game company to advertise on MTV here in the United States. They hadn't done anything like that. So we were trying to be edgy. We were trying to be older. And of course, the very controversial thing is we did games. We did the rating system so that we could rate games. These are okay for young kids. These are okay for teens. And these are really designed for those over 18. We had mature video games. So that whole thing was something that Nintendo hated and Japan didn't really like either. And we did Mortal Kombat in its original version with red blood, which of course Nintendo refused to do. They did green gore, which nobody cared about. Just like Mortal Kombat, green gore. What the heck is this? Even Howard Lincoln, the president of Nintendo, admitted that was one of the reasons why we outsold them, at least on the Mortal Kombat software. We outsold them, he said 5 times. I think it was more like 10 times. But anyway, so I'm trying to think. Those are a lot of the things we did that Nintendo didn't do. There were a lot of things that we did that Sega Japan didn't do. We went after the girls market too. We had products that were designed for women. I mentioned the rating system. Oh, and then of course we were the founders really of the E3 show. We started that because we hated the CES show because they treated us badly. And so we started our own private show, and initially it was just a small show with Electronic Arts and ourselves and Activision and a few other companies. The buyers, remember there was no internet really. The buyers loved having a private show with us where they could focus all their attention on video games, being distracted by everything that was at a CES show, the televisions and the stereos and the car systems and the what have you. And so that grew into become the E3 show. And we'd formed a new association because the software association was mostly dominated by people like Microsoft and Oracle and what have you, and they didn't care about video games. So we started our own entertainment software association. Later it became the IDSA, Interactive Digital Software Association, and they took over the rating system, and they took over the E3 show, and that became a way for us to be represented in Washington D.C. So anyway, there was a lot of things that we did that were first in the industry that were not done in Japan.
Since you have talked so much about the specialists of the video game market, what's the bigger difference that you see between the toy market and the video game market back then?
Well, obviously the toy market is for younger children. And by the way, even though I say we spent all of our marketing dollars going after teens and college, I was very much aware if there was an older brother in the house and we were attracted to him, we were marketing Sega to him, the younger brother was going to want what older brother had. So by marketing to older boys, we were automatically going to get much of the time the younger boys as well. So that was part of the overall strategy. It wasn't that I was ignoring the younger market. I knew that they would follow along with the older teenage boys. So the difference is obviously in age. The toy market is very much a young market. It seems to be getting younger every year. It's really it's a 2 to 8 or 2 to 9 year old business, whereas the video game market is more of a 9 through, well, the average age of a video game player today is 31 years of age. I don't know if you're aware of that. When I left the company, our average player was 18 years of age. Today, it's 31 years of age. By the way, it used to be that the toy market was the bigger of the two markets. The toy market, when I was involved, was about a $20 billion market. And the video game market, when I started, was about a $5 billion market. Today, the video game market is a $150 billion market. The toy market is still only about 22 billion in the United States, and it's about 80 billion worldwide. So the toy market is much smaller than the video game market today. Whereas when I started, it was the reverse of that. The toy market was larger than the video game market. Toys are largely purchased by moms, whereas video games are not. They're generally purchased by the teens themselves or by college-age guys, or given as gifts from their parents or relatives. So there's a lot of differences in terms of market itself, and of course we're really an entertainment market, much like the movie business is. Don't really see toys quite that same way. I think that toys are wonderful, and play is terribly important. It's not like you get involved as much as you do in a video game. You get so involved in a video game, much more so than even you get involved in a movie or a television show. So I think those are the main differences between the two.
And how do you see the video game market today? Do you still look into it? Do you still play something that's modern?
No, I'm really out of it quite a bit today. I occasionally see one of my sons playing video games, but I have not played a video game in a long time. I've had 2 strokes in the last 2 years, and I can't really use my left hand at all. First of all, it'd be very hard for me to play a video game today. I'd have to do it with one hand, which is difficult. But I really haven't. I do in my basement. I still have a Genesis hooked up. still have probably 180 or maybe 200 video games down there. So people can play video games at my house if they want to on the old Genesis system. Actually, I think I've got 2 hooked up down there, and I also have a Saturn hooked up down there.
But what do you believe, since we have talked so much about your time at Sega and how you have left it, what do you believe that killed Sega and what could have saved it? Because nowadays Sega like don't exist. It's just a few Sonic here and there, and that's all.
I know. I find that shame, frankly. I do think even if they don't get back into making any hardware, they have enough intellectual properties from old Sega games that they could redo and bring back on new systems and be a much more successful company, I think. But yeah, we talked about why I left Sega already, so I don't think I need to go over that again.
Yes.
But it's a shame there isn't your Sega presence in the world today. I think they have great properties, they have great IP from the video game business and also from their arcade businesses. They just aren't using it. I don't know why, but they've chosen not to.
Yeah, and literally they have made a Sonic movie just now, and the last game was, I don't know, was a few years ago. So why don't they keep on investing on the video games that they have? Like they have Sonic, they have Alex Kidd, they have Golden Axe, they have many games that they could keep reviving and showing people just to don't end up being forgotten at the video game marketing, because today we literally have just Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. There isn't many.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with you. And there's a number of other properties that you didn't mention. I mean, like Echo the Dolphin.
Anyway, as I was saying, I think they could continue to have been a presence in the video game market to a much bigger and larger degree than they are today, and I just don't understand why they're not. I don't understand what their thinking is in Japan. It seems like they've almost given up on the business. But I saw a rumor that they were going to get back into the hardware business that I thought was interesting, but I don't believe it. I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, it was actually, I don't know if you're into the Google Stadia, that project from Google where you play games through stream. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
I've heard of it. I haven't done it.
But anyway, what I have read is that Sega is going to do a similar thing, but to arcades. That's what I have heard, at least.
What do you mean, similar to arcades?
No, something similar to the Stadia, but with arcades, not games.
Okay, yeah, that's possible. That's their heritage. They really believe in the arcade business. Remember, Sega was merged or purchased by Sammy, and Sammy Corporation is the largest pinball, pachinko game company in the world, and so they know the location-based entertainment business very well, and that really is their roots. So they're more comfortable, I think, with location-based entertainment than they are with the home video game business.
Do you have any special memories and special moments you would like to mention about your time at Sega and marketing actions you remember? Like there's the Sonic Tuesday, which was very famous, the global release of Sonic 2. If you could tell us a bit more about that, because that's a very interesting moment, because as far as I could read, Japan even released the game a few days earlier there just to break your strategy, right?
Yes, that was another one of those things that they did in Japan that didn't make sense, but now that I've explained why they kept getting beaten up by their chairman, Nakayama-san, why they didn't want to agree and do things that we did in the United States. So Sonic Tuesday, by the way, was a real major effort. And the only reason we were successful in doing it, because it had never been done before. I mean, I think there are 20,000 retail outlets in the United States, and another 20,000 around the world, where our idea was we were going to have them introduce Sonic 2 on that Tuesday, Sonic November, and they were all going to get it at the same time. Well, how do you do that? We had to, fortunately, our offices in Redwood City at the time were next to Emory Air Freight's office. And I'd gotten to know the president of Emory Air Freight, and I explained this problem to him, and he said, well, we can do that. We can airship cartons of this game you want to every retail outlet so that they all get it at the same time, the same day, the same hour. And so we were just lucky that we had Emory Air Freight right next to us in our office in Redwood City. And so that was why we were able to pull it off. And of course, it became a huge hit here in the United States. But as you mentioned, in Japan, they didn't cooperate, and they released Sonic a few days ahead of time. They didn't cooperate with us, so they were the ones that didn't participate in Sonic Tuesday. And as I think you know, Tuesday has become the day when all new video games were released. And it used to be on Friday, back when I was there, but now it's Tuesday. And so we started a trend that is still carried out to today.
Do you have any other memories, any other moments that remarked you in a way, even good or bad, that you would like to mention?
Sure. I mean, one of the happiest days, I think, was when the head of market research walked into our conference room and said, according to the NPD research firm, we just passed Nintendo in share of market in the United States. And that was a very happy day for all of us, I would say. Another time that was very happy, you remember, and I think it's told in the book, we couldn't get Walmart to cooperate with us. We couldn't get Walmart.
Yeah, I know that story very well. I know that story.
It was really painful for me because I knew all of Walmart senior management very, very well. I still know the chairman CEO is Doug McMillan. I know him very well, and every now and then I'll see him. I remind him of this story. They wouldn't carry Sega product because they were afraid of Nintendo. They were afraid they'd get punished. Nintendo wouldn't ship them hardware, wouldn't ship them software. And so we opened up a store down the street in Bentonville, Arkansas, from Walmart headquarters. We put a big sign up that said, "Come play Sega Genesis for free." And we put as many TVs and Genesis machines in there as we could. And we had kids literally lined up. And we had someone they only allowed them to play for like 15 minutes, and then they had to go get back in line. And we had a line out the door. We bought every billboard in and out of Bentonville, Arkansas. We bought the football cushions, the seat cushions in the football stadium down the road at the University of Arkansas, and bought radio and television time in Bentonville, Arkansas about Sega Genesis. And eventually one day the vice president called me. Oh, and then I would call him every week, and I'd say, by the way, Rich, at Target we outsold Nintendo by 20% last week. Or, Rich, last week in Toys R Us we outsold Nintendo by 50%. Thought you'd want to know, and I'd hang up. And then one day, a few weeks later, he called me up and he said, "Tom, just stop it. Take down all the billboards, close that damn store. All of my board of directors keeps asking why we aren't carrying Sega Genesis, because obviously everybody wants it." And so that was a great moment for me, where we won that battle and got Walmart to carry Sega Genesis too. But anyway, there's so many great things that happened while I was there. I mean, as you mentioned, I was very fortunate. I had a great team of people. I'm still as I mentioned, I'm very close with Al Nilsson and with Madeline Canepa-Schroeder and Diane Fournacier and Michael and Christine Risley and E.B. Van Buskirk. I'm still in touch with all these people almost every week. And so it was a great experience, a great team of people. And it's really a David versus Goliath story, where this small team of people in the United States could, in a sense, defeat the giant Nintendo, at least for a period of time, through their efforts. And it really was, everybody contributed to the efforts, everybody had a part in it, and I was just very fortunate to work with these people.
There is a famous quote by Mr. Minoru Arakawa, who was the president of Nintendo of America while we were there, that says that eventually Sega would disappear if they just kept doing what they were doing, so they just didn't should should not bother to answer your aggressive marketing in the same coin. In the long term, do you believe he was right?
No, not really, because they also ended up changing a lot of, even though they don't like to admit it. Let's face it, the video game market is very different than what Mr. Arakawa thought it was back then. Today, as we talk, the video game market is played by grown men. The average age is 31. A lot of 40-year-olds playing video games today. And that would not have happened had it just been for, if Nintendo had been left to its own devices. They would not have realized the potential of the older age market, I don't believe, which they eventually did recognize, and they do products that are quite good and for all ages today. So no, I don't think Arakawa was correct on that. It's an interesting thing. I've never met him. I have never met
Really?
Mr. Arakawa. No,
Really?
I know Howard Lincoln quite well, and I knew the head of marketing quite well, but I've never met Arakawa-san.
Well, that's actually pretty strange
Yeah, it
if you
is.
think about it.
It's very strange for me because in the toy business where I came out of, I was always very friendly, on very good terms with my competitors. I'm very close to the Hassenfeld family, the founders of Hasbro. I was very close to the Tomy family in Japan. Very very close to the Fisher Price people, to the Lego people. So I knew all of those people very very well, and very friendly with them, even though we were competitors. But I never met Arakawa-san.
Yeah, I believe as I was doing research for my paper, which I can even send to you if you want after it's
Yes,
done.
yes, please do.
I can translate it to English and send it to you if you want to. But as I was researching, I have found out that the Japanese people actually have a big sense of honor. That hurting their honor is actually very bad to them. So think that you I mean Sega of America, were more successful than their Japanese counterparts would actually hurt them. And besides, you mentioned that the toy business were a lot more friendly than the video game people. But that's also because Japanese actually value a big sense of community. So it's very difficult for them to accept people outside their field of their side of their field of living, the people they know. So they
Yes.
end up being a bit more ambiguous and even harsh sometimes. Do you believe such characteristics of personality impacted how Sega's business turned out in the United States and in Japan?
Yes, I do. I think you're right on that. And one of the other characteristics that I found very, very strange was the way they almost revered Nakayama-san. They were afraid of him. They were terrified of him. And he literally, I mentioned it earlier, I saw him many times when he would be berating one of his subordinates. He'd hit him. He'd slap the guy across the face or across the shoulders. And can you imagine doing that today? I mean, it's just I cannot imagine it in business.
Not at all.
But they would not just bow to him, which of course is a Japanese custom. They would literally almost get on the floor and prostrate themselves in front of him because they were so afraid of him and they revered him to such a degree. They made him like a godlike figure, and it was very unusual. It was something I had never. I'd worked with Japanese companies before, but I'd always seen this. I called it the Shogun effect. The Shogun warrior was someone who had to be respected to such a great degree, and that is how the senior manager of many Japanese companies are regarded by the subordinates there, but not to the degree that Nakayama took it to another. He took it to a new level.
And you mentioned it that you have children that play video games nowadays, Do you believe your experience in the video game business changed the way that you raised them?
Maybe. I mean, I'm very accepting of that and very accepting of video games' positive impact I do think that video games help brain development. I do think some video games, even though they aren't intended to be educational, can be quite educational. I think they help develop technical skills. I know that in the military, the jet pilots, before they went into combat in Afghanistan and in Iraq, used video games to warm up, before they took off in their jets off of carriers and things. So I think there's a lot of positives that come out of video game play.
Well, I should thank you for your time, because I don't want to bother you more than absolutely necessary, because I know you are a very busy man. So I thank you very much for your time, Mr. Kalinske. And would you mind if I ever reach out for you again if I have more questions or something? Because my research is still in progress. It should be done just next year or so. So it will still take a while. If I ever need to talk to you again, would you be...
I'd be happy to talk again, and I can imagine you probably will come up with some new questions.
Yeah, probably
ask, and some things that maybe need clarification, and that's fine. So that's
great.
Good talking with you, Flavio. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Kalinske. Have a good day.
You too. Stay well down in Brazil.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys had fun. And we'll see you, as always, on Minicastle. Bye bye! Precisando de reparo em seu console clássico ou moderno? Manda para Gamescare, com venda de produtos de alta qualidade para o seu setup RGB, cabos SCART, transcodificadores, escalonadores, adaptadores de controles, tudo com produção nacional. Visite o site gamescare.com.br.